So this is a center for spiritual living. Our vision is a world that truly works for everyone. And our way of accomplishing that, our mission, is to create a space so that each of us and the community as a whole could gain contact with the divine within us. And that's the essence of our center. I'm very pleased to have you all here. I was actually a little concerned that literally no one would show up. There's some competition down on the Malecon, and then there's the intermittent competition of angst over the COVID thing. So who knows what people are going to want to do.
Never mind parking.
Parking.
Oh, parking. Well, parking is kind of secondary to the issue down on the Malecon, I believe. In any case, the good news is that the concert that was planned at LCS did not happen. I don't know if it was why exactly, but we were expecting to have some really good rock music, or maybe not so good rock music, at a volume that would far exceed what our speakers are able to produce. So we seem to have escaped that bullet. So that's the good news. We're going to start out with a song by Susan Sims. Say Suzanne or Susan?
Suzanne.
Suzanne.
You can say Susanna because we are in Mexico. So
Okay.
Suzanne.
And Arch will start the background music.
Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy.
Reverend Rennick.
Good afternoon, everybody. Please join me as we do our invocation this afternoon, as we take a breath and go within, as we listen to the beautiful words of the song that come from St. Francis, lover of nature. In that love of nature, we come within and find goodness within, God within, expressing itself as a power, the presence, the essence divine that moves us in every which way, that guides us in every way, that takes our hands and takes us where we need to go. We are here to experience and to acknowledge that presence within each and every one of us. And as we gather in this beautiful place, in this beautiful afternoon, a small but powerful group, recognizing that essence that speaks from the bottom of our hearts and expresses as who and what we are. We begin this service in acknowledging that essence and giving thanks for that divine presence within. And so it is.
So we're blessed to have Reverend Monica. She's one of two people who are certified, verified, Spanish-speaking Science of Mind ministers in our midst, in addition to Reverend Rebecca. So the theme of the Centers for Spiritual Living this year, last year it was about Phoenix rising from the ashes, which definitely seemed very appropriate. This year, it is about going within so we do not do without. It might not be quite worded that way, but it's close. We'll get it straight for the website so you can get the actual message. And traditionally, January is a time when there's kind of a survey in the talks in our centers, sort of saying, well, what is Science of Mind? What are the Centers for Spiritual Living? So I will do some of that, and at least attempt to. The idea that we could live a life beyond belief also was that we could live a life beyond fear. And the interesting thing for me is that although at first it's like beyond belief and like, wow, this is so wonderful, I can't believe it. But the other meaning that for me is somewhat more central is that according to my understanding of our teaching and our philosophy and my experience in life, that it's largely what I believe in that is a source of much of my own suffering. And often the beliefs that initially caused me significant success in different ways later on seem to be, as I depended upon those ways of being, the cause of things not going well or life being not as fulfilling as it might be. So that knowing what I believe is critical if I want to have a different experience, because I can't change something that I don't know. And there's a fairly apparent, there are kind of two levels of belief. There are the things that I'm right about. You know, I know that everybody ought to be vaccinated, darn it. And I know that, you know, women should have choice about whether they deliver a child. I have opinions about things that I hold strongly to, and sometimes not very kindly to, actually, that while maybe in some sense they're right, through, I guess, this process of going within, I can also see that they are maybe not right, that nothing is totally right, and more importantly, that my sense of rightness is injurious to me and others. And that's the level of belief, the true believer, the crusader, the put in your favorite group, both in terms of who you think are really doing a great job and thank God for them, and those who are the, quote, enemy, those who are doing harm in the world and are you know, should somehow be stopped from doing whatever they're doing. This is not to deny that there are some decisions and some points of view probably in the long run are better than others. And some things are really not good. Child abuse, rape and incest and murder, and you know, there are a lot of things that are definitely not good that probably a large percentage of mankind would say, yes, that's not good, even though we continue to do it. So that's a little bit about how some of what the year is about and what I see our work is about, certainly my work is about in the current time. Where did this all start, and how are we different from anybody else, and how are we similar to many, and how did this happen in the course of history? For me, there's a lot of places that one could say that what now is Science of Mind started, but the one that's most direct and obvious is with the Transcendentalists 200 years ago. And most of you, how many of you know what the Transcendentalist movement was and could name at least 2 people that were involved in it and a book or 2? So, significant number, but not, it's not even the majority. So I thought I knew about it, and then I happened to be walking with a gal who was a student of literature in general and English literature in particular, and I started to think, I better not talk too much about this or I will expose my ignorance. So I went home and Googled it, and I got there are different types of Google responses, but I got one that was from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I thought that should be pretty good. So they said, Transcendentalism, a 19th century movement of writers and philosophers in New England who were loosely bound together by adherence to an idealistic system of thought based on a belief in the essential unity of all creation, the innate goodness of humanity, and the supremacy of insight over logic, and experience for the revelation of the deepest truths.
Do that one again.
Yes, and some of it's fairly
Sounded good.
clear. No, fairly clear and say, is based on the belief in the essential unity of all creation, the innate goodness of humanity, and the supremacy of insight over logic, and experience for the revelation of the deepest truths. And that's basically what we believe in. And it's, and it's obviously also been stated in a lot of different other ways. And the founder of this particular stream of thought and belief was a guy named Ernest Holmes, who wrote prolifically from the 1920s through the 1950s, and not only did he write an incredible amount of books and such, but he also did started to do a lot of lectures. So this movement is about lectures and teaching. He initially did not think in terms of a church. In fact, what he thought of was that his teachings might enrich the spiritual practices of people in their own traditions. So he had no particular interest in starting a new quote religion. And in fact, he probably didn't start a new religion really. What it did lead to were churches, centers, and the necessity of that became fairly clear. So here's how I interpret it, that there is knowledge and truth, and people in various times throughout history have had revelations and put it in and experienced it and put it in terms that others could understand. So there is greater revelations that are expanding, so there's no final revelation, again, my perspective. And when they occur, there is teaching often, or first talks, and then often workshops, or think other ways in which teaching can occur besides lectures. What is missing from that in this case led to churches, was community, the Sangha. So there's an African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with others. And it's very clear that the kind of personal work that is involved in this particular manifestation of awakening and spiritual realization requires interactions with other people. It requires listening to other people, being heard by other people. And we have developed, this teaching has developed a way of, and a lot of the teaching is how in fact do we change the beliefs of the underlying assumptions that are what lead us to our suffering. At about the time when this became a church, there was a book published by Aldous Huxley called The Perennial Philosophy. How many have heard of that? Or yes, quite a few have heard of it. How many have actually read it? Great. The beauty of that book is that it traced from a kind of recognized kind of person who had become involved in mystical kind of thinking, traced exactly the thoughts and the history in at least much of the history that was available of this kind of different view of what we come to now call spirituality, as distinct from religion. Now, most of the time, many people say, huh? Spirituality versus religion. The major difference is spirituality is this kind of inner work and changing ourselves, and it doesn't have the answer. There is no the answer in spirituality. There is a source, a sense of that as I become more accessible and listen more deeply to that small voice within, or as I connect more with life. So it's often for me in connection with animals and with nature and with beauty. So it's not necessarily just about meditation or what many people would if they wrote down what's spiritual. To me, it's a lot more than it's a long list, not a short list. So he wrote that book about that time, about in '46, and it sort of made it easier to understand and from a different point of view what we were about. Uh-oh. Oh yes, this is the quote I wanted to read next that also captures the essence of it from my perspective. A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from the prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature. Any guess who wrote that, said that?
It was recent. Was that Ram Dass?
No, it was in the 50s, and it was Albert Einstein.
Oh, yes.
So, and that's the beauty of this particular thread, of which we're a part, or this weave, is that many of the sayings and the statements are not readily placeable to person or time. So things that have come from Sufi masters or Hafiz or Meister Eckhart have pretty much the same kind of message and understanding and connection that says, this is not just a particular cultural belief system. It's pretty human as opposed to limited to one group or one thing. So how does that apply to us? What are we, this community, doing here? And I don't know. At one level, I really don't know. But what I've found out, so I went through ministerial school 15 years ago. It was about 15 years ago is when I graduated, and several years later, with the mentoring of Reverend Rebecca and support of a lot of people here, I became qualified to be ordained, so I was ordained. We had a nice ceremony here. It was fun. And I had kind of a sense of what the different centers that I'd been involved with in the United States were about. And most of them were, had kids programs, and there's a lot of people in their 20s and 30s off the street that had just realized they didn't know what they didn't know what life was about, and they really wanted some place to quote, learn about it. And I got here and kind of tried to do that, recreate that, which is normal, that's looked good to me, and I'd like to see that. And not too far into it, might have taken me 2 or 3 years, it became obvious that we were about something different. We, meaning the people who generally come here, who are generally over 60, probably an average age of mid-70s, and who are pretty alive, but have done a lot of things and are in a different stage of that life and that process. So what we are doing, I think, was captured rather clearly by one of the books from Daisy Beth's Thursday morning deal, and she mentioned Ram Dass, is walking each other home. So part of it is being very present to ourselves and to each other as we are in this stage of life, which involves, in some ways, being more alive, at least for me, than I'd ever been before, but also realizing that many of my capacities are less, and my prognosis is not good. You know, probably the chance of me being here in 25 years is really pretty slim, and the chances of me being able to make any sense to myself or anybody else is even worse than it is today. So given all that, how do we be with ourselves in this kind of realization? How do we in each moment really experience our aliveness and that of others? How do we, at this point in our lives, also continue to contribute in the way we can, participate in life? Being alive requires participation. Being part of the group that is traveling means that we are supporting and allowing others to support us, which for me is a very strange concept. I'm used to being the fixer, the leader, the know-it-all, the whatever. You ask me a question and it doesn't matter if I don't actually have any information or relevant thing to say about it. I will always, I will give a judgment, an opinion that sounds plausible to me at the time until I think about it later and say, what did I even talk about? I don't know anything about whatever, really. I mean, so how do we have this experience? That for me is what we're here for. To accompany each other, to continue to gain the support of each other, to connect ever more fully with the richness of the universe, knowing that we have it, that the universe is inherently alive and a flow that is ongoing, of which we are a very important and in the grand scheme of things, kind of minuscule. But in this moment, in this place, in this life, we are it. And we get to be that. This is all as part of saying, stick around, participate with us. I need your help, for sure, and we need each other's help and company. We need each other's listening. I need to learn how to listen. The listening and the being with others allows us to see where our growth is, our growth edge. There are things that that have happened to me as a result of being here that 5 years before I got here, I had no inclination that was what I was coming here to experience or to do or to witness. So keeping that sense of the beginner's mind, because we are beginners. We're just starting in this moment. To maintain that beginner's mind and be willing to allow in all these ideas. All the ideas of richness is certainly not limited to people who are in science of mind or in new thought. It's pretty clear that there are a lot of very enriching and rich people in all traditions, and in some that we can hear, I can hear easier than others, but there's a lot of support. This is not just some small sect, which we are, relatively speaking, but it's about humanity waking up and seeing ways of relating to each other. I'm going to give a talk at the UU Center in 2 or 3 weeks, I think of the last Sunday of the month. And my topic is going to be on the othering of America. The fact that we have become, and to some degree actually have been, for much of the history, a divisive, conflictive, impassioned in some ways, group of people, but often at odds in a way that does not serve anybody very much. And I think it's time to recognize that's that's a major problem. All the issues are issues, but the being in total conflict most of the time is a recipe for failure, a failed state. And so I'm going to be talking about that. If you're interested in hearing that, come to UU in 3 weeks. Otherwise, stick around. The UUs are great, but stick around here. We'll continue to enjoy together, and I am looking forward to being part of this community as we acquire others who are teachers, and as I mentioned, we have a lot of ministers. I'm excited that we're going to be doing more things in Spanish. That is a determined thing. We're going to be doing a lot more things here. One of the things that I realized in the kind of shutdown time, even though I liked actually having, sort of quiet time and being able to just focus on kind of inner stuff, is that being in that state, I was actually going crazy. That's not a good human place to be, and my impression is I may have been going crazy, but it seemed like the world was way ahead of me in that regard. So I'm hopeful that in spite of the current situation where I think this is a limited splash, that we're going to be able to spend more time together. So we will go on, because I used up most of my time, to a good song called Beautiful. And Suzanne will sing this song.
Oh, you ready?
You've got to get up every morning with a smile on your face and show the world all the love in your heart. Then people gonna treat you better. You're gonna find, yes you will, that you're beautiful as you feel.
Live music by somebody who can sing.
So I'm in charge of the offering, as it says on the agenda today. But I want to say a couple of words about offerings. And Tim talked about the flow of the universe. And the flow of the universe, with respect to offerings, involves the law of circulation. You give, you have, you give, and you receive. It's all a circular motion of the universe. And so with sacred giving, we give to that which feeds us spiritually. And I believe there could be no debate that this place, Tim, and all the people involved in this feed us spiritually. And so I leave you with those words as we pass the basket around. First, I've got to put my own in.
Stay.
Everything in this basket is blessed. Blessed by the universe, blessed by spirit, because it came from a group of people who are all individually blessed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maureen will be talking in 2 weeks about, here, it's what the blurb I have, how do we navigate life when, as the last 2 years have shown us, we don't have as much control over our lives as we thought? How do we embrace I don't know and shift to realizing that the future is full of mystery and opportunities? So this will be her talk on the 23rd of January.
So this is our time for a benediction, which is Latin word, which means good word, good words. So I want to send us off with some good words. So if you join me in consciousness, let's close our eyes for a moment and just take a deep breath. Just breathe into our hearts, knowing there's only the one in each of us. And I know for each of us, even though we come from different backgrounds, we are one with the one, and we are one with this love. We are filled with love. And I give great gratitude today for the ideas that Reverend Tim has talked to us about and help us to waken up, waken to a higher level of consciousness. And I give great gratitude for everyone who has participated in this fellowship, because we are all one with each other on this path, walking each other home. Thank you, God. So I release this word. I know it's acted upon us, spoken. I know it is so, and together we say, and so it is. Thank you.